Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Influencer Show, where I interview people who can help influence the way you live life in a number of different ways. I'm your host, C7, and today we have a very special guest with us today. And the special guest with us is Don Leslie. So would you like to introduce yourself to the listeners and let them know a little bit about you?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me onto your show today. I'm delighted to be here. What am I? Well, I'm a middle-aged Scotsman. I live in London, and I spent many years running a recruitment business for management consultants. So what I do now is give advice to people who want to become management consultants. But if we scroll back to my early history, I was born in Glasgow, as you might be able to tell from my accent. I went to university in Edinburgh, and I came down to London about 40 years ago. So London has been my home far longer than I've lived in Scotland. And I really love being in London. There's so much to do, even in these difficult times when theatres and cinemas and museums are closed. Nevertheless, there's so much to do here. It's a great city.
Thank you so much for sharing. So now I'd like you to share with the listeners why you do what you do.
Okay, so I retired from my business about 5 years ago. But over the course of the first weekend that I was retired, I realized that retirement was probably not for me, in as much as I have this unfortunate Protestant work ethic, which means I have to keep working. So I have to keep doing things that I think are productive, that get me out of bed in the morning, which mean that I don't crack open a bottle of wine at 10 o'clock in the morning and watch Netflix all day. And so I thought, well, what can I do? My professional life is advising people how to become management consultants and getting them jobs in management consultancy firms. So now what I do is go around business schools and universities, and I talk to students about what management consultancy life is like and how they too could become a management consultant. So I do that partly by visiting business schools, partly doing it on webinars, and also just taking coaching calls at home from my top bedroom.
That sounds amazing.
Well, it's a life that I've been able to construct for myself, which fits perfectly into the lifestyle that I want to have, which is do something, but not very much.
Thank you so much for sharing that. So what would you say has been the biggest influence on you that you wish you had known sooner?
Gosh, with age comes wisdom, and sometimes you don't really appreciate what life is about until you reach a certain stage where you've had more experiences. I mean, for example, when I was 21, my biggest wish was to be able to pay off my mortgage. Now I've paid off my mortgage, and my biggest wish is I was 21 again. But there are lots of things. I particularly appreciate my parents' help or encouraging me to read at a very early age, because that opened up a whole world of literature, of books, of travel, of excitement that I wouldn't have had at such an early stage if they hadn't encouraged me to read otherwise. So one of the earliest lessons I got from my parents was self-confidence, and they had taught me to read at a very early stage. And I was about 5 years old, and it was early December one year, and they'd asked me if I would be prepared to read a passage of the Bible at a church service. And I had no conception of what that actually meant. But so, of course, I said yes. And they said, well, in order to help you read better, why don't you learn the passage off by heart rather than actually just reading it from the Bible? So that sounded to me like a good idea, so I did it. So I was well rehearsed with this passage from the Bible, so I could just say it like a poem, say it like that. So on the morning of the Sunday before Christmas, we went to the church service, and my parents said, this is what's going to happen. The minister will ask you to come up to the front and read this passage, and you'll just get up there and read it. And you need to stand behind this lectern in order to read the Bible. Now, of course, I was only 4 feet tall, and if I stood behind a lectern, nobody would see me. So what the church had done was it prepared a box for me to stand on and wrapped that box in Christmas paper. So there was me, a little boy, walking out to the front of the church, pulling a box covered in Christmas paper in front, behind the lectern, standing on it, and now people could see my little head peering over the top. So as I looked out to the congregation, they were all smiling at me. And I thought they were smiling because they knew I was going to be reading from the Bible for them. And of course, they were probably smiling because they'd seen my actions standing on a box that was covered in Christmas paper and peering over the top. But that smile that I got from the congregation gave me such confidence that I was able just to deliver my passage from the gospel without any hesitation at all. And from then on, I have never been nervous about standing up in front of people and talking to them. I think public speaking is a great skill to have. Now, I don't say that I stand up in front of people and talk off the cuff. I'm always prepared, but I've got no nervousness at all about doing that. And that was a great life lesson that my parents taught me.
That's actually amazing. I totally agree with that 100%. As a child, personally, those two very important things were also installed to me as a young age, and I really see it they're paying off. So now I'd like to ask you, how do you prefer to influence others to change their lives for the better, and why?
Oh gosh, I mean, that's a really difficult question for me to answer, in as much as I don't think I'm really in any position of great influence to help people, to tell people to change. But in my own little narrow area of expertise, which is helping people to become management consultants, if I can help them achieve that goal, that will allow them to do the other things that they want to do in their life. That might bring them happiness, it might bring them wealth. And if I can achieve that, I think that's me done my little bit to make the world a better place.
Oh, indeed, yeah. Thank you so much for saying, and I hope that you listeners are definitely taking some golden nuggets from what Don Leslie has said so far. So now I'd like to ask you, what would you say people should do to stay motivated during moments of crisis?
Right, well, motivation, and I mean, it's particularly a relevant question at the moment where we're in the middle of this coronavirus epidemic and people are locked up at home and find it difficult to get out. Well, I think the first thing to remember is this will not last forever. So in any crisis situation, remember that there will be something positive at the end of it. Well, it depends, of course, on the crisis situation. If I open my front door and see a saber-toothed tiger, that's a crisis situation that I have to react to quickly. But most crises are such that you can think a little bit before you act. So take the opportunity to pause, reflect on what the issue is, and then what could be the way out. Who else can you talk to help you solve this problem? Are there other people that whose advice you would always defer to, who you think would be able to give you some suggestions as to how you might manage to get through this difficult period? But I say again, all difficult periods come to an end, most of them, almost all of them positively. So there's no reason not to be optimistic about coming to the end of something. So don't act quickly, but reflect before you act.
Very keyword and concise. Thank you so much for sharing. So how, what is your passion and end goals?
Well, you know, I think I've reached my end goal, which was to retire early, to have sufficient money and health to be able to do what I want to do. And now I suppose my passion is to raise my children in a way that my parents raised me, to give them the values that have guided to a great extent my life, and to give them the opportunity to advance further than I have in my life. So I was the first person out of generations in my family to go to university. So that was a great start for me. And I'd like to think that my children could succeed even more than I have with the help and support and the love that they'll get from me and my wife.
Thanks so much for sharing. I actually wanted to touch on something really, because I heard that you spoke about not only money but also health, and that's something that's often overlooked because everyone's all into making all the money. If you are not healthy and you're not in that state of mind, then you won't actually be able to enjoy what you've worked for.
Well, that's true. The signal broke up there a little bit, Trey, but whilst money is important, it's not the most important thing in life. Yes, money is up there with oxygen. We all need to have money to buy the basics and security, but be realistic about what it is that you need in your life. I remember somebody once telling me that you can only wear a maximum of 3 shirts in any day. So you don't need to have more than 3 shirts. That's a little bit of an exaggeration, but the point was well made. You know, why have a wardrobe full of wonderful shirts when the maximum you can wear every day would be 3? And I think, well, certainly the older I've got, the more I've realized that there are lots of nice things to buy out there, but actually there are not lots of nice things that I don't need to buy, that are not necessary for me to have happiness and fulfillment. If I had an unlimited amount of money to spend on myself and my family at the moment, we would travel. I love traveling, and at every opportunity, I'd like to go to foreign places. I don't need a sports car anymore.
Thank you so much for sharing, and I really do appreciate that. So now I'd like to ask you, if you had a megaphone and you could say one thing to the world that would have a lasting influence on the world, what would it be and why?
Right. I guess be nice to people. You know, there is so much good that can be done if people are just decent and ordinary and pleasant to each other. What's that biblical expression? Do unto others as you would have done to you. And you know, that's absolutely perfect. Be nice to people, they'll be nice to you back. Be honest, be trustworthy. People will rely on you. Be enthusiastic about things. You don't necessarily have to be very good at something, but if you're enthusiastic about something, then I think others will see that in you and help you on your course. So that's more than one thing, but I've got a big megaphone. I can say many things.
Thank you so much for sharing. And actually, that's really important because loads of people, they might have like their own idea that they like to come up with, but because they don't have that backing, that support, they've actually like procrastinated and many other things, and they've actually given up. And on that note, I'd like to ask you, what advice would you give to those who have had their very own £1 million idea at a time like this?
Okay, well, go for it. It's the first thing I would say. Don't procrastinate. If you've got an idea and you think it's going to work, then sit down and work out how it's going to work. Don't be shy about taking advice from others, from professionals who might be able to help you, or mentors that you have. Always be aware that if you've got £1 million to spend on an idea, other people may want some of that £1 million, so you've got to be careful about who you trust. Yeah. But if you can find people, partners that you can rely on, people you can partner with, it makes a great deal of difference. When I set up my business in the late 1980s, I did it with 2 very trusted partners, 2 people that I'd worked with before. I knew I could rely on them to be honest and to pull their weight and give as much to the business as I was giving.
Oh, that's actually very key information. Thank you so much for sharing. So now I'd like to ask you, what is the biggest issue or problem that you are aiming to solve as an influencer in your own industry?
I think my answer is the same as the one I gave earlier, that I would like to give people the opportunity to pursue their own line of happiness through finding a job in this particular area that I specialize in, management consultancy. I don't think I can do anything more than that in terms of giving my specific knowledge to people. Yeah, I think I come back to that same answer again.
Huh, thank you. So now I'd like to ask you, what would you say was that pivotal point along your journey, and what did it teach you?
Gosh. Education, education, education. I think Tony Blair said that. Always learning, always improving. I think that's very, very important. Again, I come back to my parents, and they were keen for me to be as educated as possible, to take the opportunity to learn more wherever possible. And I keep that advice at the forefront of my mind every day. I'm always trying to learn something new, be it taking a book off the bookshelf or borrowing from the library to read up about something that I don't know about. At the moment, I'm teaching myself to play blues harmonica, so that's a new skill that I'm trying to acquire. I'm in my life, I always try to be open to opportunity and grasp opportunity when it's presented, because who knows where you might end up. And I have many regrets about not grasping opportunities that maybe I should have and might have taken me into a different direction. And I think it would be foolish to live your life regretting the things you could have done. So always explore the opportunity. Maybe even the road less traveled is not necessarily a road that should be avoided.
Yes, very true. Actually, that's actually really important, because how you said that knowledge is power, really. And also, you're actually very lucky to have been blessed with like that open mindset, because that way you're then open to learn new things regardless of where you are or what stage you're at in life.
Yes, indeed.
And now I'd like to ask you, what are the top 3 lessons that you have learned along your journey, and how did they influence the way that you look at life?
Oh, gosh. Always look out for people that you can trust, that are honest, and be honest with them. At a younger age, be enthusiastic. You don't necessarily have to be expert at anything, but if you start off being enthusiastic about whatever it is you're doing, learning something or in work, then you will improve. And people are more likely to recognize that enthusiasm and that trustworthiness in you, and therefore support you. So I think that's an important life lesson. Money, learn how to control it and not let it control you. Again, it's part of my Scottish upbringing has taught me to be parsimonious with money, to be careful with money, because when I was growing up in the 1950s and 1960s, we weren't a poor family by any means, but money was never plentiful. So I've learned how to run my life with a sufficient amount of money, and if I have an extra, then save it, don't spend it. And one of the great miracles of life is something called compound interest.
Yes.
And what I learned at an early stage was, if I have any spare money, tuck it away, forget about it, and then in the years to come, it will have bloomed and blossomed. So I taught myself how, about the stock market, for example, how to invest in stocks and shares. And I would set up what are called regular saving schemes. So £10 a month or £50 a month, or when I was getting richer, £100 a month, £1,000 a month into saving schemes. And then when I would look at them in a year's time or 5 years' time, gosh, they'd grown. And the fact that money was going out every month from my bank account didn't really make any difference. I knew I could afford to just tuck that money away, so I kind of forgotten about it. But it was there when I needed it. It was there when I needed to put down a deposit to buy a house, or to pay for my kids' education, or whatever. So having that understanding of money and knowing not to spend more than you earn, and ideally spend less than you earn, to tuck bits of it away, is important.
That's actually really important. It's often overlooked so much in society nowadays. For example, like myself, I was fortunate enough to get into trading and to have a mentor for 2 years who taught me. And that actually taught me the power of money and the importance of saving and investing, and also knowing when enough is enough, because that's something that people often they don't know when it's enough.
Indeed, indeed.
So now I'd like to you to share with the listeners, if you had to be another person for one day, who would it be and why?
Ooh, great question, Trey. I would like to be, just for a day, a Roman legionary at the edge of empire facing the Gauls or the Picts, or a red coat in one of Wellington's squares at the Battle of Waterloo, or a British Tommy going over the top of Ypres in World War I. And the reason I would choose those things is I want to see how I would behave under danger. You know, do I have courage to do things that those people that I've just given examples of would have had to have done? You know, in modern life, unless the saber-toothed tiger is at the front door, we don't put ourselves in any positions of danger. And I'd be interested to see how I reacted. Would I do the things that I would like to think I would do? You know, be brave, support my comrades, do the right thing, or would I turn tail and flee? I don't know. But if I could have that experience for one day and know I'd come out at the end of it alive, that would be great.
That's actually really interesting. I totally understand why you've made that choice. Thank you so much for sharing, and I hope that you listeners have gained so many golden nuggets from Don Leslie so far. So now I'd like to ask what your views are on the word legacy and what legacy you would like to leave.
Okay, well, you know, legacy is a big word, isn't it? And I suppose the legacy I would like to leave would be first and foremost to my children, or my family generally. I'd like to think that I've provided them with some guidance and some support and given them a platform on which to advance further, and for them to make their own decisions in life about what they want to do, to, as you've just said a moment ago, not to recognize that money isn't necessarily the most important thing and isn't the driver, and that enough is enough, that you don't have to have those 3 shirts to wear every day, and that they will be sensible and decent people. And I hope that so far their mum and I have raised them in that fashion.
Thank you so much for thank you so much for sharing, actually. So now I'd like to ask you, is there anything that you've done in the past and now looking back on it, you may have wished that you would have done it differently or maybe even sooner?
Oh, there are plenty of opportunities I can think of going back to childhood that I wish I'd grasped when I didn't, or I wish I had spoken up when I'd stayed silent, or wish I'd said yes when in fact I'd said no. But you know, that's life. You make choices and you live with those choices. And I touch wood, none of the choices I had to make were good or bad. That they all turned out in the end to be positive and all took me down the same. Well, I wouldn't say necessarily the same route, but have all led me to the point in life where I'm comfortable, I'm healthy, I hope, and I enjoy the life I'm leading. Yes, there will always be things maybe I regret, but in the scheme of things, it doesn't matter now. No point in looking back on things that I can't change now.
Yes, very true. And that is actually, it actually reminded me of something really. There's something called the, I think it's called the manifestation prayer, when it's about God granting you the knowledge to know what you can and what you can't change and being able to identify the difference between the two.
That's right. That's right. God give me the strength to change the things I can change and not to worry about the things that are out of my hands.
Yes.
Yes.
So now I'd like to ask you, is there any advice that you would give to your younger self?
read more. Although I spent a lot of time as a child reading, I would have loved to have been able to spend even more time reading. And maybe a piece of advice that I would give to my kids now is to spend more time with themselves. Solitude is actually a good thing and allows you to reflect and read a book without distraction. And I think I benefited so much from reading and having time to myself, and that's something I would like to gift to others to help them get on in life.
Oh, that's very key information. Thank you so much. So now I'd like you to share some advice with those who may be starting something new and are starting to give up.
Well, don't give up too quickly. Persevere, but be realistic. There are some things that will not work for you and some things that we cannot change, and there's no point in beating your head against that proverbial brick wall when that will make no difference. So don't pass up the opportunity to try something new, but if you fail, it doesn't matter. You've learned something, go on and try something else. They say you've got to kiss a lot of frogs before you find your prince or princess. And I guess that's like any endeavor. Some things you will not succeed at. You will not get to the end goal, but it doesn't matter. Just as long as you don't let that define you, but go on and do something else.
Very true. And I hope you listeners have definitely gained something from that. Now, lastly, I'd like to ask where people can find you if they'd like to find out about any upcoming things you may have.
Okay. Well, I have a website. It's called don@donleslie.uk. And that's where I post information about the support I give to people who want to become management consultants and post some general pieces of careers advice. I often make little videos and put them on YouTube or on LinkedIn, and anyone trying to find me just needs to put Don Leslie into their Google search, and I think they'll find me fairly quickly.
Thank you so much for sharing. And yeah, guys, be sure to check that out. And now I'd like to say thank you so much to yourself, Don, for coming on the Influencer Show today. And
it's been my pleasure, Trey, and thank you very much again for inviting me. And I hope some of my garbled words have turned into pearls of wisdom for your listeners.
Trust me, they definitely have. And also, thank you so much to you listeners. And if you guys would like to have the chance to be on the Influencer Show, please feel free to email the email that's going to be popping up on the screen, and I'll be sure to send you across the application process. Thank you so much for listening, and have a great day. Bye.
Bye-bye, Trey.